Okay, today is about equations and intersections of lines, and it's a review day. That means I'm going to go really fast because you already know lots of this stuff. And I get, though, that means you're going to feel like, holy crap, he talks really fast and goes over stuff. It's because I have to cover 5 days worth of material in the past, that's old stuff, all at once today, because you should know all of this. So that's why it's going to go so fast today, because it's a review day. Slope-intercept form is that form. What does the M stand for? What does it stand for? Slope. Very good. What is the equation of the line in the picture? Well, it's got a y-intercept, and I can tell by looking at it what the slope is. Would you please figure out the equation of that line? Hint, you probably want to write it like this, except it's not a 6 for a slope, and it's not a y-intercept of 4. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. So I asked the student, and the student said it's 2x minus 1. And tell me why you did that. It's right. What were you thinking? How did you get a slope? That's called a lattice point, yes. You find a couple of those, and then? Yeah, it's how much did it rise? 2. And how much did it run? 1. 2 over 1. So I could have said this, too, and that would have been a good way to say it. And then how'd you pick the negative 1? Yeah, it's that spot. It's the y-intercept is negative 1. Very good. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Awesome. Moving on. What's the slope of this line? I hope you can do slopes when they're weird. What'd you get? Because it rises negative 1 and it runs 2. The rise part was negative 1. The run part was 2. So it's negative a half. Very good. All right, this next part. Name the y-intercept of the line in this picture. Ooh, that should be easy. But do you get if you type this into Schoology, you could be totally right, but it would might be looking for a different way to write that? That is the right answer, but there's another way to write that. And Schoology goes, you're wrong. Even though you know the right answer, you're just saying it wrong. The Schoology would want it like this. What comma what? Well, it's y equals negative 4, so where should I put that of these two spots? The y spot is negative 4. And then at that spot, what's x equal to? Well, I'll give you this hint. It's the y-intercept. And I've given you this statement since the beginning of the year. The y-intercept is where what? X equals 0. So therefore, this has got to be 0. Or you could just say, what's the name for that dot? 0 comma negative 4. My point, if you type this in the Schoology and it marks it wrong, maybe it's because it wanted that. And that's one of those where, again, I understand sometimes that happens. So I'm not that particular on Schoology scores in that I give you 3 chances to do it, and it'll average them. And as long as you have a decent score at the end, I give you the credit for it. In other words, I don't just brute force copy exactly what's in Schoology over into Skyward because of these kind of things. I totally get it. Kid might got this right by saying this, but get marks wrong because they didn't know to put it in that format. Okay, the next one, question 5. What is the equation written in slope-intercept form of the line blah? Slope-intercept is this one. That kind. What's the equation for this one? It's like that. This is the wrong answer. It's just telling you what form. What'd you get? 3x seems like you think the slope is 3. Raise your hand if you agree with her. You're right. And then plus 0. Do you really have to put plus 0? No, you don't actually. But it's okay. Doesn't hurt anything. All right. Good job. Do you get how that actually it cleans up a little bit if you do that? But it also doesn't feel like it's in slope-intercept form. I will accept either as slope-intercept form. But do you get which one's actually more simplified? You don't need the plus 0 because it hits at 0, but you don't need to put that. All right, moving on. What is the equation of this line in this picture? Man, we just keep doing these over and over again. But I think what they're trying to get at is to see if you notice this slope is a little weird. Don't just think the slope is 1 on this one. It's not. I'm going to pause while you answer question 6. So everybody's getting this right, which is y equals, how much rise did you guys get? 3 over how much run? 4x, and then it has a y-intercept of 2 plus 2. Okay, you're really good at that. Do you know how to do vertical lines? When it says vertical line through the point 3 comma 4, I would make a little sketch of it and then try to figure out the equation for this. Hint, vertical and horizontal lines only have x or y in them. Your answer might be like x equals 2 or y equals 5. Try to figure out the equation for this vertical line and make a sketch. There's a reason they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. It'll help you to have a little picture. Goes through the point 3 comma 4. All right, here's the point 3 comma 4. Now, vertical, hopefully you know which direction that is. That's this way. And now, here's my hint. It'll either have an x-intercept or a y-intercept. Do you get this one hits the x-axis at 3? X equals 3. You get if it would have hit the y-axis at like 7, we'd have said y equals 7. All right. Which line is parallel to this? Well, it's got 3 different choices here. Sorry, 4 different choices. Parallel means something about the slopes. Do you remember that? If they're parallel, the slopes are what? Opposite reciprocals is not the one. Parallel ones are the simpler ones. If they are parallel, think about their slopes. Think about this. Doesn't the slope look kind of the same on parallel lines? So therefore, which one was it? Red, blue, yellow, or green? It was blue, because it's the same. All right, how about what would perpendicular have been? Actually, none of those. Green is close, but it's got to be negative. If I had wanted perpendicular, I look at the 4 and I say, ooh, 1/4, but it actually needs to be not just flipped, but also the opposite, negative 1/4, if we had wanted perpendicular. All right, next one, write the equation of the line through this with slope that. If you remember this guy, it'll help you. I'm giving you that hint. Try to answer number 9. If you have that equation memorized, that's smart. You know why? Because it comes up in this class a lot, and it comes up next year in pre-calc a lot, and then it comes up in calculus a lot. In fact, I've been told by calculus teachers that this is used way more than y equals mx plus b. They use this way more than that in calculus. Okay, so get this puppy memorized. That's one of the reasons it's on the top 20. Remember I be telling you about the top 20 and the 20 most important things? This is one of them. They often will have this kind of question on the ACT. Where here's a point. Tell us the equation of the line that goes through this point. All right. So, if you know how to use this puppy, hopefully M is the easiest thing. It's the carryover, right? It's the slope. Same in both those equations. M is the slope. So slope is 2. How many of you had a 2 right there? Awesome. Then, did you know how to put these in the right spot? Here's the common mistakes. People go 1 comma 3, so I'll put a 1 and a 3. Why is that wrong? They're reversed. X is 1, and that's where that's supposed to be. And Y is 3, so that's where that's supposed to be. Now, do I leave the negatives in there? Yes, I do. The equation has negatives in it in the first place. So yes, the answer is y minus 3 equals 2 times x minus 1. And I know that may seem opposite, but notice they're both in, well, this one could be in parentheses. All right. The other way to say it is, the standard form of this equation has negatives in it, in the equation. So if you have the point, those don't need negatives. All right, final answer, this. Now, some people have this urge to solve it for y. You can do that, but then it won't be in the right form anymore. You're going to get it back to this. Let me just do it in my head quick. I'm multiplying this out, and I have negative 2 plus 3 plus 1. You were right. And you don't have to do that, though, just so you know. You don't have to solve it for y unless it specifically says to. This would have been a perfectly good answer. All right, and last but not least, put this in a slope-intercept. That's this kind. Put this into that form. What is that really saying to do? Solve for what? Solve for y is all they're really saying to do. Go ahead and do that. Because that's going to be the very first question on your Schoology quiz is something like this. And they're not going to say solve for y, Mr. B. Can you unplug? Thank you. They're going to say find the slope. Do you get by solving it for y, you're getting the slope? So you got to be careful. They're not just going to tell you everything to do. They're going to say, here's what I want, and you're going to be like, oh, so what should I do? If they want the slope, you better solve for y. All right, did you get 2y equals negative 4x plus 6? That would have been a good start. How do you finish the deal? Divided by 2. And you would have y equals negative 4 over 2, which is the same as negative 2x. And the 6 divided by 2 becomes 3. So this should be really negative 2. Negative 2x plus 3. Why is that better? Because now I know the slope and I know the y-intercept. And I couldn't have told you those by looking at that. All right, one last thing. A lot of kids get stumped on this one. Wait. Same as the equation I just had a second ago. And they know, oh, the y-intercept's just sitting right there. That's easy. What's the x-intercept? The x-intercept is where, say that louder. Yes, I'm glad you had that instinct. The x-intercept is where y is 0. Put a 0 here and you can solve it. See what I'm saying? The y-intercept's easy. It's just duh right there. But what's the x-intercept? Where y is 0. You stick a 0 here and you solve it. Would you please do that? Solve for me. Because that's another question right off the Schoology quiz. Is kids got this and they know the slope and they know the y-intercept, but what the heck is the x-intercept? The x-intercept is where y is 0. Would you please compare rows 1 and 2? Compare with the kid across from you. There's only one kid who doesn't have somebody across from them. Rows 3 and 4, there's somebody right across from you. Rows 5 and 6, there's only one kid. Would you check with these guys? See if you get the same thing for the x-intercept, which is where y is 0. Let's see if you did it right. Should have subtracted 3 from both sides. Negative 3 equals negative 2x. Divide both sides by negative 2. Negatives cancel. And you get x. Oh, it's right there. X equals 3 halves. The negatives cancel. 3 halves is a great way to say it. Or if you have to, you can say 1 1/2. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Awesome. You just figured out the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and the slope. All by solving for y. That's pretty common. Just take this sucker and solve it for y. The other reason it's good is this equation right here, it's solved for y. That can be put in a calculator and graphed. We're going to do that on Friday. There's going to be you can't really put equations in the calculator until you solve them for y. One thing that's nice about Desmos, if you have used that app before, you don't have to solve it for y. That's kind of cool. You can just type in 2x plus 6 equals negative 3y, and it'll graph it. But you have to be able to solve for y because on the ACT test, they don't allow you to use Desmos. You might have this cool way to do it on Desmos that doesn't work. You'll have to use a graphing calculator. All right, moving on. Slope of a horizontal line is. Draw one, and then ask yourself, what's its slope? It's not that hard when you see a picture. Make a little sketch. You know what a horizontal line looks like? Because if I said, what's the slope of that line? You'd be like, well, duh, it's 0. It doesn't rise at all. 0 rise over, I don't care what, run. But if you don't have the picture, it's a lot harder. Final answer, what is the slope of the horizontal line? 0. Because it has no rise over unlimited run. You could say 0 over 10. Is that a thing? Yeah. 0 divided by 10 is just 0. It's not a problem. It's if you're dividing by 0 that would be a problem. Okay. What's the y-intercept of this? Here's the hint. Solve it for y, and you'll know the y-intercept. Let's not, though. Let's just save time. Take a look at this one. They want a line perpendicular to that. We've gone over this. Did you catch it? Should I make this slope -3 of this other line? No, that would make them parallel. What do you think the most common mistake answer is? Yes? Minus? Yes, that is the most common mistake answer, -1/3. Why is that a mistake answer? Some people are probably thinking that's the right answer. Yes? You have to change the sign also. +1/3. And then if I wanted an equation with that in it, I could put anything here, as long as I didn't have the same y-intercept as that one. Actually, you know what? I could even, yeah, that would still work. Actually, I could have any number I want right there. I could have 2 there if I wanted to. I could have any y-intercept. As long as their slopes are perpendicular, this and this have to be opposite reciprocals. It doesn't matter what your y-intercept is then. It could have been 12, it could have been 2, doesn't matter. All right. And I think that's enough. Holy smokes, that took a long time to get through all that stuff. Now, have we covered absolutely everything? No, we haven't. But there's a few things left. If you see this, do you know what it's called? Because I got to be able to say slope-intercept, and you got to be able to say, oh yeah, I know that. That's that one. That's slope-intercept. What's this one called? Point-slope. Why? Because it's got a point in it, and it's got the slope in it. Why was this slope-intercept? Because it had the slope and an intercept in it. Why is this called standard form? It doesn't have to be. I could call it zippity-doo-dah form. It doesn't have a great reason for the word standard. It doesn't like tell us anything. Okay? It's kind of the suckiest of all the forms. We don't use standard form that much at all. Now, we sometimes use it. We sometimes use it for doing something called elimination method of solving a system of equations. I'll be showing you that in a minute. All right. So, quick review. If you see a horizontal line, do you get, is this x equals -2, or is it y equals -2? Well, look at it. What's it hitting right there? Is that hitting the x or the y? That's hitting the y. So that's y equals -2. Okay? And then, hence, vertical lines, logically, would be x equals things. Because, look at this. It's hitting right here at x equals 3. So that's the line x equals 3. Okay? On to this kind. We talked about it, parallel and perpendicular. Did they do the right slopes? Look at these lines. Did they do the right slopes? To be parallel, they kept them the same. Was that correct? Yes, it was. To be perpendicular, did they do them right? They did, because they did opposite reciprocals. You would think, from the way I was asking the question, that the answer was no, but it was yes. They are right. All right, moving on. If I had to graph this, I hope this would be a no-brainer for you. You go down to -5, but you know what? I never know until I have people do it. Would you please start at -5 and then graph that for me? Let's see if you remember how to do slope. Also, this one, you're going to start at the point, careful, -4, 3, and then graph that one. Once you got these two graphs done, compare it with the kid next to you. So we got about 20 minutes left in class. My ideal world, we're finished with this lesson in about 10 minutes, and then I give you about 10 minutes to start the homework quiz in class. Even though it's homework, I really want you to be going on it in class. Pausing again while you finish graphing these two. Okay, so on this one, it's pretty straightforward. I have a slope and a y-intercept to start at the -5, and I have rise 2, run 3, rise 2, run 3, rise 2, run 3, etc. And so that's how you graph the easy kind. How about the harder kind? Why is it harder? Only because it's negative, and people often forget to go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. That's what that other one should have looked like. How many of you had yours in the right orientation? Okay. It's really easy to by accident do a positive slope and go rise 2, run 1, rise 2, run 1, and go like that by accident. Okay. I don't need you to do these two, but I just want to talk about them for a second. If they wanted me to make a graph perpendicular to this, that means I don't use that slope, right? What do I use for slope? Positive 1/3. Do you get they just told me a slope and the y-intercept? Do you get point slope could work because I have a point and a slope? And do you get slope intercept could work because I have an intercept and a slope? You could use either way. You know what I mean? I have everything I need to build that equation. And I have everything I need to build that equation because I have a point and I have a slope. So I could put in the point here and the slope there. Or since it happens to also be the y-intercept, I could put it here and put the slope there. So I could use either form to do this. All right. This one is only tricky because they say don't solve it for y. I don't like those kind of things because you know what? You can solve it for y. What's going to stop you on a test? Like, can I go over there and say, make sure he's not solving for y? Solving for y is just a great way to solve. They're trying to make you think of another way to do it. But solving for y is probably a smart way to do this one. Okay, but could I do it another way? If I'm not going to solve for y and get this, they're effectively saying, I want you to do it this way. How am I supposed to do it that way? Well, I guess I'd need a point, and I'd need the slope, and then I could do it, right? So the slope's easy. What am I going to do again? Solve for y. And a point is kind of a little tougher. How do you get a point by just looking at this? Here's how I do it. I've told my kids the XY chart's your best friend in graphing because it can solve any graph. You don't have to know what the parent graph looks like. You can just stick in points. How do I do that? Here's an easy one. If I stick in x equals 0, that's gone. 2y equals 12. Y must equal 6. 0, 6. I know a point. Isn't that handy? And that point happens to also be the y-intercept just because it's where x equals 0. So now I got the y-intercept. And now if I just knew what the slope was, well, you know how you could find another point? Wait a minute. 0, 6 is right here. You just find another point on it and then find the slope out from that. Can you find any other point on this graph? Yeah, just stick in another number. Like let's say I stick in x is 1. Go back to this. I stick in x is 1. It's really powerful for and then just solve that for y. Then I'll have 2 points. As soon as I have 2 points, I can make a slope. Just don't underestimate these. They're really, really powerful to have XY charts and solve anything. If I give you some weird yeah, it's a little hard to find the points from the XY chart, but it's not impossible. If I had to get a point for this and somebody said, Mr. Server, find 2 points, I'd go, okay, x is 0, stick in a 0, that's all gone. I just have to solve that little mini equation and I'll know one of my points. So I'm going to times both sides by 8 and I get y equals 80, 0, 80. It's not that hard, even with really weird equations, to find points. And once I graph a bunch of points, I just have to connect the dots. All right, enough about that. I think we've covered everything that you need to know. So I want to start. Oh, there's substitution and elimination. Most kids know substitution, but let's talk about elimination for a minute. Substitution is where you stick this in for y. If y is x minus 2, I'd put an x minus 2 right there. And I'd have x minus 2 equals negative 1/2 x plus 3, and I'd solve it. You need to know how to solve that. I'm not going to review solving equations with you. Other than, if you weren't in my class first semester, you might not know this. How do you fix fractions? You times by the denominator. Times 2, times 2, times 2, and times 2. 2x minus 4 equals, that cancels, negative x plus 6. That's way easier to solve now because it doesn't have a fraction. All right. That's substitution. How about elimination? That's this kind. I can just add them straight down. 7 plus 1 makes 8. Negative y plus 3y makes 2y. And 2y or 2x plus 3x is 5x. But that didn't really help because nothing got eliminated. It's the elimination method. So how do you do something first to make stuff eliminate out of this? Usually there's some kids that knows, oh, you just times the top equation by this. Anybody know? What do you think? Okay, you can multiply the bottom equation by something, but it'll be harder. You don't really have to multiply the bottom equation by anything. What do you think? All right, I will. Now tell me why you said to multiply by 3. Yeah, look at this. When I add them, do you get that's going to make negative 3y on top and positive 3y on the bottom? So when I add them, those will disappear. And this is 9x, not 6x, we're timesing. 9x plus the 2x makes 11x. And 21 plus the 1 is 22. And if you can't solve that one, put you back to algebra 1. X equals 2. Okay, so what do you do with that? What do you mean? Aren't I done? Why am I not done? I found x, but I didn't find y. So then, go back to the original, and it's super easy now. You now know that x is 2. You could put it into either equation, whichever one you want. Personally, I like not having negatives, so I'm going to stick it in this one. So then it's 4 plus 3y equals 1, and I just have to solve. And I'll know what y is. See what I mean? Once you know x is something, stick it into either one. You could have stuck it here if you wanted. That would have worked. But I don't like negatives, so I chose the bottom one. Subtracting 4. Dividing by 3. Y is negative 1. I already knew that x was 2 from before. I got 2 and negative 1. What's that? That's a point. What point is it? It's the point where those two lines, if you graphed them, they're both equations you could graph, and that's the point where they would, what? Intersect or touch. All right. That's called elimination method. I want to give you one more like that. I got two equations. If I graphed them and saw where they crossed, that would be a way to get the answer. But if I want to use elimination, then I got to times hint the bottom one by something to make something eliminate. There's actually two answers. You could times the bottom one by one thing, and then x would eliminate. You could times the bottom by something else, and then the y would eliminate. Give me an option. 3? All right, I'm going to times by 3 and watch what happens. 3 here, and a 3 here, and a 3 here. And then, when I add them straight down, hey, those cancel. Sweet. 5x equals 12, and there's 22. And yeah, that's a little bit of an icky fraction, but that's how you'd do it. X equals 22/5. If you had to, you'll stick that back up in the equation and solve. And it would be icky because I didn't set this up nice. We usually set them up to pretty nice. Moral of the story, to do elimination method, you multiply the top or the bottom by something so that when you add them, something gets eliminated. All right, that is it. And now it's a Schoology quiz. I want you to pull that up with me right now. All right, so let's get started on the Schoology quiz. The first thing, the slope of this. To find this slope, I don't expect you to just know it. I expect you to solve this thing for what? Y. And then once you do that, you'll have the y-intercept just sitting there? It'll be sitting there. Y equals, and let's say it was 3x, it's not, plus 7. The slope will be just sitting there. The y-intercept will be just sitting there. How about the x-intercept, though? That's where you stick in what? Yeah, the x-intercept is where what is what? Y is 0. And you stick in a 0 here and you solve. All right, so first, solve it for y. All right, going on to question number 2. I know we're almost done, but we're not quite yet. On question 2, it's asking you to write equations that do certain things. Like on this one, they want it to go through these 2 points. Kind of tricky because we never did one called point, but do you get from 2 points you could know the slope? Then once you know a slope, don't you have a slope and a point? This is right off the top 20. If you know this, you're going to know one more of those 20 most important things. Okay, because it involves a couple things. First, do you know how to find the slope between 2 points? It's the y's on top subtracted over the x's subtracted on the bottom. And make sure you do it in the same order. Like, for instance, I could do -2 minus 3, and then -3 minus -1. That's a way to find it, but you can't flip-flop back and forth. If you start with this minus this, you got to do it the same way. All right. Once I got the slope, it's easy. Then you can pick either point. Remember, when you're all done and you hit submit, it's going to tell you the answers, and that's a critical moment. If you just go, okay, I got, half of them wrong, I'm done, you're not learning. Take a moment, look at the answers, try to figure out what you did wrong. Okay? And then if you realize, hey, I could do this way better if I did it a second time, do it a second time. It'll average you 2 scores and you'll get a better score. Okay, that's all I have for you for today.